Because I'm me, I'm different. I just have a different constitution, I have a different brain, I have a different heart, I have a different, I get tiger blood, man.
He was once the highest paid actor on television, but his life collapsed into chaos. Charlie Sheen was Hollywood's ultimate wild card, a star born into fame who rose to the top with blockbuster films and sitcom glory. At his peak, he made nearly $2 million an episode, America's sitcom king. But his private life was a storm of addictions, scandals, and public meltdowns that turned him from adored celebrity into a symbol of Hollywood excess. Even today, his career remains uncertain, his legacy tangled between brilliance and self-destruction. This is the story of Charlie Sheen, how fame gave him everything, and how he nearly lost it all. Carlos Irwin Estevez, the world would know him as Charlie Sheen, was born on September 3, 1965 in New York City. He was the youngest son of actor Martin Sheen, a man who would become a Hollywood legend. But Charlie's beginnings were not those of a child star pushed onto the stage. They were quieter, almost ordinary. A boy playing baseball, sneaking into his father's movie sets, and watching from the shadows as Martin built a career on intensity and grit. The Sheen household was unlike most. Dinner conversations often revolved around scripts, directors, and the politics of Hollywood. But beneath that glamour was something more human. Charlie and his siblings saw firsthand how unstable the acting world could be. Martin Sheen's early career was marked by struggles, financial uncertainty, and health scares. Most famously, his near-fatal heart attack on the set of Apocalypse Now. For Charlie, the lesson was clear. Greatness in Hollywood came with a price. In high school, Charlie began to imagine his own place in that world. He picked up a Super 8 camera and, with friends like Rob Lowe and Sean Penn, filmed short movies. They were rough amateur productions, but they gave him an outlet. Where others saw teenage fun, Charlie treated it like training camp. He wanted to master the art of being in front of the camera. And more importantly, he wanted to escape being just Martin Sheen's kid. The question of identity would follow him his entire life. His real name, Carlos Estevez, marked him as Hispanic in an industry that was far less diverse than today. Fearing typecasting, he adopted the stage name Charlie Sheen. His brother Emilio kept the Estevez name and built a respected career on his own terms. For Charlie, the choice reflected ambition and insecurity at once, a desire to belong in Hollywood's mainstream, and a fear that his birth name might keep him out of it. His break came in 1984 with Red Dawn, the first PG-13 movie in American history. At just 19, Charlie found himself among the Brat Pack generation, a loose group of young stars that included Rob Lowe, Emilio Estevez, and Molly Ringwald. They embodied youth, rebellion, and the anxieties of the Reagan era. But Charlie wasn't quite like the others. He didn't lean on charm alone. He was hungry for dramatic roles that could prove he was more than a handsome face. That hunger paid off. In 1986, Oliver Stone cast him in Platoon. It was a brutal, unflinching look at the Vietnam War. And Charlie played Chris Taylor, the wide-eyed soldier who transforms under the weight of violence and trauma. The role was more than acting. It echoed Martin Sheen's own iconic turn in Apocalypse Now. Critics noted the eerie symmetry, father and son, two generations, each embodying America's war-torn conscience. For Charlie, Platoon was not just a job, it was validation. The film won the Oscar for Best Picture, and suddenly, he wasn't Martin Sheen's son anymore. He was Charlie Sheen, a rising star. The momentum carried him to Wall Street, 1987, again under Oliver Stone's direction. Here he played Bud Fox, a young stockbroker lured into corruption by Michael Douglas's Gordon Gekko. If Platoon had made him a symbol of innocence lost, Wall Street made him a reflection of 1980s greed. Sheen embodied the everyman caught between ambition and morality, a role that spoke directly to America's cultural anxieties. By the late 80s, Charlie Sheen had become a paradox, both an insider thanks to his family and an outsider who had to prove himself. He could carry a war epic or mirror society's flaws in a financial thriller. He was not just a celebrity, he was a cultural barometer. Yet there was another side. Unlike many of his Brat Pack peers, Sheen didn't shy away from comedy. In 1991 and 1993, he starred in Hot Shots, and Hot Shots, Part 2, parodying the action hero archetype with perfect timing. For audiences, it was proof he wasn't trapped by typecasting. He could laugh at himself and make millions laugh with him. But beneath the laughter, something deeper was happening. The character he was most known for, charming, reckless, slightly dangerous, was beginning to blur with who he was off-screen. Hollywood loved this duality. Charlie Sheen wasn't just playing roles. He was becoming a brand, the wild card, the loose cannon, the man who could switch from serious to ridiculous in a heartbeat. This duality reached its peak in 2003 when CBS cast him in 2.5 Men. The role of Charlie Harper, a rich, womanizing bachelor living in Malibu, was almost indistinguishable from Charlie Sheen's real life. It was art imitating life, and life imitating art. Audiences devoured it. The show was a smash hit, one of the most watched sitcoms in America. Sheen's laid-back delivery, sardonic humor, and playboy persona made him television's crown jewel. By 2010, he was earning nearly $2 million per episode, making him the highest-paid actor on TV. For network executives, he was untouchable. For fans, he was the ultimate guilty pleasure. And yet, even in this triumph, the seeds of collapse were already sown. Charlie Sheen was no longer just acting the part of a reckless bachelor. He was living it. The boundary between character and man was gone. At the height of his rise, Charlie Sheen had everything: money, fame, power, cultural relevance. But what made him magnetic to audiences, that sense of danger, of unpredictability, would soon turn against him. Because for Charlie Sheen, the rise was only half the story. By the mid-2000s, Charlie Sheen was living a double life. On screen, as Charlie Harper in 2.5 Men, he was America's favorite rogue. Witty, carefree, a playboy whose recklessness was lovable, even charming. Off-screen, he was living the same script, except the charm was giving way to something darker. The truth is, the warning signs had been there for years. As far back as the 90s, Sheen's name had filled tabloids for his heavy partying and high-profile relationships. In 1995, he even testified in the Heidi Fleiss Hollywood Madam trial, admitting he had spent more than $50,000 on escorts. To the public, it was shocking, and yet strangely fitting. Some saw him as proof of Hollywood's hidden debauchery. Others thought it only added to his bad boy charm. That paradox, scandal damaging his reputation but fueling his image, became the cycle of his life. And by the time he reached the height of 2.5 Men, that cycle was spinning out of control. The role fit too perfectly. Sheen didn't have to stretch to play Harper. The character was, in many ways, him. For CBS, it was ratings gold. For Sheen, it was a trap. The more audiences adored Harper, the harder it became to separate the character from the man. When Charlie Harper got drunk and chased women, it was comedy. When Charlie Sheen did the same in real life, it was tabloid fodder. And gradually, a professional liability. His long history with drugs and alcohol resurfaced with new intensity. He cycled through rehab programs that never stuck. His personal relationships unraveled in public, often ending in allegations of violence. In 2009, he was arrested after a domestic altercation with then-wife Brooke Muller, a stark reminder that the chaos of his private life was spiraling into something dangerous. And yet, 2.5 Men thrived. The paradox was undeniable. The worse Sheen behaved, the more audiences tuned in. At one point, the show drew over 15 million viewers weekly, and Sheen became the highest-paid actor on television, earning nearly $2 million per episode. For CBS, as long as the ratings soared, Sheen was worth the trouble. But by 2010, the balance began to collapse. Tensions with showrunner Chuck Lorre escalated as Sheen's off-screen behavior became impossible to ignore. He missed rehearsals. He lashed out at producers. He gave rambling interviews that swung between arrogance and incoherence. What had once been dismissed as bad boy antics was now clearly a full-blown meltdown. In early 2011, it all came crashing down. Sheen went on a media blitz that was equal parts mesmerizing and disturbing. He ranted about tiger blood and Adonis DNA, declared himself winning, while mocking the very idea of rehab. Clips went viral. Memes exploded. For a brief moment, Charlie Sheen wasn't just a sitcom star, he was the most talked about man in America. But it wasn't admiration anymore. It was spectacle. In March 2011, CBS fired Charlie Sheen from Two and a Half Men. It was a stunning fall. Within weeks, the highest-paid TV actor in the world had gone from cultural icon to Hollywood exile. The irony was brutal. The role that had cemented his success, the reckless, womanizing Charlie Harper, had also fueled his destruction. Life and character had fused into one. And when that persona finally imploded, it took his career with it. Sheen's downfall wasn't quiet, and it wasn't dignified. It was loud, chaotic, and broadcast for the world to see. A modern morality play where the punchlines had run out, and the man behind them could no longer keep up the act. After his firing from Two and a Half Men in March 2011, Charlie Sheen could have disappeared, a cautionary tale of Hollywood excess. Instead, he chose to step further into the spotlight. Within weeks, he launched a national tour with a title as chaotic as his state of mind. My violent torpedo of truth, defeat is not an option. Tickets sold out instantly. Fans expected the manic wit of his viral interviews. The tiger blood, the winning. What they got was incoherence, disjointed rants, awkward silences, and a star visibly unraveling. Crowds booed. People walked out. Reviewers called it a disaster.
Charlie showing up, which he was an hour late, and it was a bunch of babble that no one could even understand.
That sucked. It was terrible.
I don't want to hear him talking about him being a warlock. I thought he was actually joking about all this stuff.
It was the first sign that Sheen's public collapse, so mesmerizing on television, didn't translate into a live act. Without a script, without the safety net of Hollywood polish, he wasn't a rebel genius. He was a man breaking down on stage. Still, Sheen tried to prove he could bounce back. In 2012, he headlined a new sitcom, Anger Management, loosely based on his own life. For a brief moment, it looked like redemption. The premiere drew record numbers, fueled by curiosity. Could Charlie Sheen really rise again? But the show lacked the spark of Two and a Half Men. By 2014, ratings plummeted, and the series was quietly canceled. What was meant to be a comeback became proof that Sheen could no longer carry a show or escape the shadow of his implosion. Meanwhile, his personal life turned into what tabloids called the Sheen Circus. His Los Angeles mansion became a revolving door of parties, drugs, and live-in girlfriends he proudly called his goddesses. What might once have been a private struggle was now a full-blown performance, curated for the cameras. Sheen wasn't just living recklessly, he was marketing it, leaning into the caricature the public already believed. The tragedy was that the more he embraced the persona, the less room there was for the actor beneath. Then, in 2015, came the revelation that reframed everything. Sheen announced he was HIV positive, a diagnosis he had kept secret for years, paying millions in hush money to silence those who knew.
I'm here to admit that I am, in fact, HIV positive.
The actor said
The disclosure was shocking, but also humanizing. For the first time in a long time, the mask slipped. The man who once bragged about tiger blood and invincibility was suddenly vulnerable, fragile. Public reaction was divided. Some condemned his recklessness, others sympathized, recognizing the pain behind the bravado. For a moment, Sheen was no longer a meme or a punchline. He was a reminder of the real costs of excess, of how fame can shield and also silence a person's suffering. But the spiral didn't stop. Hollywood had moved on. Roles dried up. Comeback attempts faltered. He was still famous, but not for his craft, only for the wreckage of it. Between 2011 and 2016, Charlie Sheen's story shifted from the fall of a TV king to something more unsettling, a man trapped in his own caricature, unable to escape the spectacle he created. By 2016, the circus had gone quiet. The headlines that once screamed Charlie Sheen's name had moved on to new scandals, new celebrities. For a man who had thrived on chaos, the silence was unfamiliar, and in its own way, brutal. Sheen tried to change the script. He spoke openly about wanting sobriety, about being present for his children, about leaving behind the warlock persona that had consumed him. He told interviewers he was done with drugs, that he was taking antiretroviral medication for his HIV diagnosis, that he wanted to live a healthier life. Friends described him as calmer, more reflective. To many, it seemed like the first genuine attempt to reclaim himself. But Hollywood has a long memory. Studios that once courted him now kept their distance. Producers remembered missed rehearsals, explosive interviews, and lawsuits. Insurance companies balked at covering him. He was still famous, but not trusted. The offers that trickled in were small. Cameos, minor roles, appearances that played off his past rather than gave him new ground. This is the paradox of Charlie Sheen's return. He could never return to what he once was. The industry that had once enabled his chaos for profit no longer needed him. And yet, the culture still couldn't let him go. His name remained shorthand in America. For excess, for implosion, for a star who had become his own cautionary tale. In interviews, Sheen oscillated between two modes. At times, he showed remorse, admitting he had wasted opportunities, that addiction had cost him everything. At other times, he slipped back into bravado, insisting he had no regrets, that he had lived a life others only dreamed of. It was as if he was caught between two versions of himself, the man seeking redemption and the character he had played for so long that the world refused to forget. Then came 2025. Netflix announced AKA Charlie Sheen, a documentary revisiting his rise, his chaos, and his aftermath. It was billed as the true story, an unfiltered look at how America's highest-paid actor had become its most infamous meltdown. For Sheen, it wasn't a professional comeback, it was something stranger, a re-entry into the cultural conversation, not as an actor, but as a subject. This was the cruel irony of his return. Hollywood no longer wanted Charlie Sheen the performer, but it still wanted Charlie Sheen the spectacle. His comeback was not on stage or screen. It was in the act of being dissected, remembered, and replayed. Today, Sheen lives in relative quiet, far from the frenzy that once defined him. He spends time with his children, keeps his health in check, and occasionally surfaces in interviews. But his career, in the traditional sense, has never recovered. For a man who once embodied both Hollywood promise and Hollywood ruin, his return is not a rise, but a kind of uneasy survival. He is still here, still famous, still haunted. And as long as his story fascinates, America will not let him fade. Charlie Sheen's story is often reduced to headlines, the wild interviews, the tiger blood, the tabloid scandals. But behind the memes and the late-night punchlines lies a deeper truth. His collapse wasn't only personal, it was cultural. Hollywood built Charlie Sheen, then burned him. The same networks that enabled his addictions when ratings soared abandoned him when the spectacle threatened their brand. The same audiences that cheered his sitcom antics devoured his real-life breakdown as entertainment. Sheen himself played into it, blurring the line between man and persona until he couldn't step back. This is the tragedy. Charlie Sheen stopped being an actor and became a character in his own never-ending show. And once the world decided that Charlie Sheen meant chaos, there was no room left for Carlos Estevez, the man behind the name. The price of fame, in Sheen's case, wasn't just the loss of a career, it was the loss of self. The reckless playboy, the sitcom rogue, the meltdown artist, they were all roles, but roles he could never escape. And yet perhaps that is why his story endures. Because it isn't only about him, it's about us. About how modern culture turns human struggle into spectacle, how addiction becomes content, and how the boundary between performance and reality collapses under the weight of fame. Charlie Sheen once said he was winning. The truth is more complicated. He won wealth, notoriety, and cultural immortality, but lost almost everything else. Beyond the spotlight, what remains is not victory, not defeat, but a cautionary echo, that the brightest flames burn fast, and sometimes they burn the person holding the match.